So I just want to begin this morning by talking about a few warning signs. This is one of my favorite signs that I've ever seen. I'm not really sure what it means. We're going to move on from that one. I love this one. Who are they going to collect from? Or there's this one. I got nothing. I don't. Do not stand on wall. Okay, I won't. I'm not exactly sure what we're being warned of in this picture. Warning, plane may suddenly explode out of your car. I don't know. Very confusing. This is, though, by far my favorite warning sign ever. Caution, this sign has sharp edges. Do not touch the edges of the... Can you read this? Also, the bridge is out ahead. Here's another version of that. Same thing. Caution, this sign has extremely sharp edges. Do not touch the edges of this sign. Also, the bridge is out. Exit immediately. But the bridge is out is in this tiny little font. You know, that's hilarious. But if you were actually looking at this, those warning signs wouldn't be very helpful, would they? You know, they wouldn't exactly move you very much. Well, you'd be moved. Whew. Down. Very far down. What you need in those circumstances is you need a clear warning. Danger. Bridge out. That's useful, right? You know, thank you. It gets you off of the road. You're like, you know what? I shouldn't keep going this way anymore. I should go back another way. You know, but wouldn't it be just tragically weird if you read that sign and the thing that you drew from it was, you know, I bet that sign has sharp edges. That would not be a good read of the sign. And not only would it not be a good read of the sign, but it wouldn't lead you to a good place. And I think the reason I started with these goofy signs is because I think you listen better when you laugh. And also because I think sometimes we approach Jesus' warnings and Matthew's, with the entire Gospel of Matthew. One of the big things that it's trying to accomplish is this loud, loud warning. Danger. Don't do Judaism this way. Don't do religion this way. Don't follow Christ this way. Because it's not a good read. The approach of the Pharisee and the Pharisee and the scribe is the big contest. The Sadducee comes into it some, the lawyer comes into it some, but the big opponent, you know it, is the Pharisee, right? The guy who's really, 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 really serious about the sharp edges of the sign. They really, 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 really love the law of God. So much so that they don't really know the God of the law. They haven't really gotten to know Him at all. So they honestly do believe that it's about tithing your dill leaves, plucking them off and counting to 10 and taking one and setting it aside. They really do think you're supposed to count coriander seeds. That's where they live, in that super, super committed religious sphere. They just don't get what they're doing. Folks, the book of Matthew is written to people who are likely to be somewhat religious, right? The people reading that book are going to be religious people. As you and I do, the followers of Christ are going to be people committed to a religion. They're going to be dedicated to practices. They're going to carry out those practices that help them to focus upon the person of Christ and the way of life set before them by Christ Jesus. That's a religious person. And this book is written with this profound, profound warning. Don't do it this way. Because in that road, bridges out. It leads only to destruction. One of the big questions in the book of Matthew is, who gets to tell us how to read the Bible? The question is not whether or not we're going to be reading it. The question is, what is the focal point? What's important? What do we make important? What do we pay the greatest attention to? And what do we allow to kind of slide back into the back? And folks, as religious people, it is so very easy. It is so very easy for the fallen nature of our hearts to drive us to pay tons of attention to things that we never should have looked at in the first place, and to pay zero attention to things that are at the absolute heart of the matter. And thus comes the warning. The question is, how do we know that we're getting the intended message? Well, one of the great things that Jesus does for us, just as His life is coming to the point where He's about to be killed, by the people, incidentally, about whom He will warn us, is that He says, hey, by the way, let me show you what not to do. Let me show you a bad lens that will give you a bad vision and lead you to concentrate on the edges of the sign instead of getting the message of the sign. Let me show you what it looks like to miss it so that you don't fall into this trap. Because, folks, it is a danger. It is such a profound danger. And it threatens, I will tell you the truth, it threatens my heart as a religious man. It would be so easy to stop paying attention to the stuff about myself that drives me in these directions. So Jesus, because of His great compassion, says, let me offer you something that will help you make sure you're getting what you ought to be getting. So, I'll skip past the warning signs. Then Jesus said to the crowds and His disciples. Now, I put that up there separate because, normally you just blur by that, right? It just says Jesus started talking, and lets you know who's doing the talking. Good, thanks. There's something to notice here. Who is Jesus talking about? The Pharisees. Who is Jesus talking to? Yeah, He is not talking to them. Now, He will. He'll go through about 12 verses, so about a paragraph of stuff that He says to them. And then He starts saying, woe to those Pharisees. He will talk to them. But do you notice that He doesn't start out talking to them? He talks to the crowds and to the disciples in their presence about them. Now, why would He do that? I mean, if they're in trouble, if they're in danger, doesn't He want to reach them? It would be a really frightening thing, I think, to imagine even for a moment that I could find myself in situations where Jesus would look at me as a lost cause. Or Jesus would look at me and say, that one's not going to listen to me, even though I try. That is the profound depth of the danger of this trap. He begins not talking to them. Now, realize that an awful lot of the early church were Pharisees. A lot of them were. He got a bunch of them. But I think what this says to us is He is well aware that there is a cage that can settle over the heart that is so strong that the person doesn't want to leave. And there's no point talking to such a person. I have better hope for all of us in this room, but I wanted to point this out. You realize that you can become so sure of yourself, because what the danger that they've fallen into is that they have their little piles of dill, mint, and cumin. all separated out on their countertop. They know they're okay. They've got so much evidence to point to that they're fine. And not only can they point to their being okay, but therefore they have the right to point at everybody else, which is, of course, what they do. And they launch their judgmental attack against everyone else. They're experts at it. They know what they're doing. And they are so self-confident that you could come to them with truth and say, hey, you realize that this is broken about what's going on here? Do you see the kind of heart it's giving you? Everyone around you knows that they have to walk on eggshells with you because you're mean. Everyone knows that. And it's your religion that's done it to you. Do you realize that? It's meant to leave you to steadfast love and faithfulness, and instead, it's led you to be a nasty, mean person. You realize this? You can say that, and they're like, oh, let me catalog your errors. And they are so trapped that he doesn't even address them, at least not at first. I think there are some that he will address. His woes, which is what comes after this, are meant to shake the cage and get as many out as he can. But this ought to terrify us because this is a danger for religious people. It's a danger that you and I face. The self-confident, self-assured, mean Christian is perhaps in that cage. Meanness and Christianity don't belong together. They don't. We're meant to be the most loving people on the earth. Shaking the cage. But he first talks to the people who aren't already bought into it, and he's saying, listen, let me tell you something. He says, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works that they do, for they preach, but they don't practice. This is a picture of a Moses seat. It's in an ancient synagogue. It's the place where you would sit down and read the Scriptures. I stand up to preach while you sit, but in an awful lot of religious communities, especially in the ancient world, our roles would be reversed. I'd be sitting, you'd be standing, right? And you'd sit on this special seat that's got the Hebrew carved into it. It's the seat that belongs to Moses. And so Moses is read, and the prophets are read, and they love to sit and read. Now, folks, this ought to terrify us. What I'm about to observe here. Jesus doesn't critique their teaching. He doesn't critique their teaching. They're right. He'll say, what they teach is true and good and right. And to an awful lot of modern Christians, that's the only goal we've got. Getting it right. Getting the right theology. I mean, there's been 2,000 years where things were all messed up, and we need to fix all of that, and so let's get it right. And once we get it right, the program's done. If we believe the right things and we have the right rituals, we can point to them and say, we're fine. I believe the right things. You know who believes the right things? Satan. He knows more spiritual reality than you will ever know. And the Pharisees, boy, they know the right things. They can point to their rituals. They can point to their offerings and to their mint, dill, and cumin. They've got it right. But they have it so wrong. The walk with God was never supposed to be a thing of ideas. At least not exclusively that. Behavior always flows from ideas. It always does. The reason we think like we're doing right now is because these ideas shape our behaviors. But the problem is they're leaving it at the idea of, I believe true doctrine, now I'm off the hook. No. We were meant to live differently. We were meant to be practitioners of our faith. People who are actually good people. Who become better and better because we walk with God. They should be good at this. They're not. Jesus looks at them and he says, they're mean-spirited. They're awful. They're a mess. Don't look at what they do. Whatever you do, don't imitate them. Listen to what they teach you because after all, they have the Word of God. And the Word of God, it's pretty good, right? I mean, it's excellent, it's perfect, it's wonderful. Listen to what they have to say, but don't do the stuff they're doing because they are a mess. They are such a mess, they're going to kill me in just a little bit. Listen to what they say, but don't do it. And as I say, that ought to rattle us. We who put great confidence in pure doctrine, it ought to shake us. If what you've got is pure doctrine, but you don't have a holy life, then you aren't getting it. Warning, the edges are sharp. Don't do this. The problem is not that they're bad theologians, but that they're bad practitioners. They aren't living well. And that's a warning for us, because it is possible to be an excellent theoretical theologian and live it awfully. To keep your grudges, to keep your anger, to keep your hate, to keep your lust, and know all those things are wrong, and to be able to speak against all the things that you do. This is not what we were meant to be. It says they tie up heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their fingers. Can you imagine? You see that woman? What is she carrying? 200 pounds? More? What Jesus is saying here is that in their teaching, they look at the high demands of Moses. Then Moses actually expects a good and holy life. And he said they get that all neat. They've got it all good, and they put it on other people. Say, live this way. The stuff they're not willing to lift with their own fingers, I'm going to suggest that's not their own burdens. It's the burdens they put on somebody else. If you read the law of Moses and you read it well, you'll see that the law of Moses calls us into a loving community. The law of Moses expects us to preserve one another's dignity, to care for each other in our hurting. And as teachers, as guides, one of their jobs is pastoral care. They're supposed to be caring for the people who are bearing the great burden of their own sin. But they won't do it. They basically say, here's the truth. Now, good luck. Hope it goes all right for you. Because I'm not doing nothing for you. Especially if I see this burden and I see you stumble under it because you're a sinner. You know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to lift the burden. I'm going to add some more. Because I'm going to attack. I'm going to be mean. You better hide all of your sin from me. Because if I see it, I will get you for it. Well, it's a good thing Christians aren't like that. That is a well-placed giggle. That is exactly accurate. Do you see the threat? Do you see the warning to us? We ought to be people that help one another bear one another's burdens. And that means that when I see that you are burdened by sin, I don't judge you for it. I lift it not only with my fingers, but with my back. I step next to you and put my arm around you and say, I love you and so does God, and you're going to get through this. That is the call of Christ. That is the call of Moses, and they don't get it. Do we? Love demands the preservation of dignity and that we are helpful to one another. God expects us to lift each other's burdens with at least our fingers. At least. So they do all their deeds to be seen by others, and that is a great threat. Has anybody else ever been here? Driving to church. And on the way to church, what's going on in the car looks like Murray Povich, right? You know, Jerry Springer is going on in the car. I can't believe it. What did you do? I spelled breakfast on my... It's bad enough that you drop the clicker. And you get to church. You get to church, and you open the door, and hey, you got the Orbit's gum ding on your teeth, right? You know, let's go in and be happy. Don't you make me look bad. Have you ever been there? I mean, I probably did it a little bigger, but you know what I'm talking about. It's so important that we preserve our image. It's so important that people look at us and they see us as good, upstanding, right, plastic Christians. It's important that we continue to glow in the dark, isn't it? It's important that we continue to have the right face and the right smile and to wear the right clothes and to be the right picture. So, because that preserves our position and our status. That puts us in the right place. Folks, it puts us in exactly the wrong place and it kills church. Church is supposed to be the place, the one place where you are truly safe. Absolutely safe, because no one here will hurt you. But the moment you've got it going on where I have to preserve my picture of who I am, the moment you're there, it's not safe for anybody. Because not only do I have to do that, you have to do that. You better not let that mask slip even a little. Because if it does, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw a heavy burden on your back. And suddenly, instead of a place where we can work together to overcome sin, it becomes a place where we're threatened by each other. We welcome the sin and reject the sinner. Keep it secret and it's welcome here. No. No. None of this is to be seen by others. It's to be real with God. So it says, for they love to make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. This is a phylactery. It's got a bit of the law of Moses in it. It's a thing that you have for prayer and you put it on the top of your head. I don't mean the glasses or the man. The wooden box on the top there. That's what a phylactery is. And here are the fringes. You put a shawl over your shoulders. And do you see how there are 1, 2, 3, 4 really long ones, and then there's lots of little tassels hanging down too? That's a religious garment. It's instructed to be like this in the law of Moses, and all of it is about prayer. And it's about showing off your prayer. You gather together with other people to enter into prayer in the synagogue, and they're wanting to be seen as being really, really religious. Listen, if your religion is focused on something that can be worn, are you sure that you're religious? And just as a side note, you may have noticed that I dress up a little less as your preacher than when I first got here. I've been kind of slowly working that direction. I'll let the cat out of the bag. This is one of the reasons. Because church that focuses on dressing up is in danger of this, big time. If your religion is something you can put on, then is it permeating who you are? Now, if you like to dress up nice because you like to offer your very best to God, more power to you. Go for it. Just don't make that a law. Because the only stuff that the New Testament says about dressing up nice in church is to criticize it. You know that? That's the only stuff the New Testament says about it. The other reason that I don't dress up nice, don't put on a suit and tie every single week, because of the thing that I hear from the people who come to us with needs for money. The people who are out there in the world, they don't worship with us. And what they say is, I always say, we offer better things than money here. And they say, I would love to, but I got nothing to wear. God forbid that this junk should keep someone from the Christ. God forbid. Because it is if we are dressing up to impress, who are we trying to impress? Be genuine with the stuff of Christ. Be real with it. And certainly don't stand in the way of the lost because you want to wear a tie. Soapbox, done. It says they love the places of honor at the feasts and the best seats in the synagogues and the greetings in the marketplaces. They want to be honored. They want to be sitting right where that guy in white is with whatever weird bag that is on his chest there, And everyone else they're all around him because that's the honored place. Don't we all want that? Don't we all want to sit in the honored place? To be noticed? To be loved? To be respected? There is something here that is actually holy. The desire to receive love from others is a holy thing. You were created to love and be loved. It's what you're for. But you see how broken it is even before I mention it, right? The desire, the interest in being honored more than being honorable, that's a problem. If you're more interested that people should notice you, should speak well of you, should be good to you, than you are in actually being a person that people would be drawn to, that people would be kind to, because that's who you are. You're a loving, generous, wonderful person. That's what the Christ is. That's what you're called to be. But the Pharisees, they're interested in honor without honorability. They want to be treated as noble without nobility. They don't want to amend their hearts. They just want the prestige. And so they approach religion as a place to look good in front of others. And he's saying, don't do this. Be honorable. And let God put you where He wants to in society. You just be a noble person. But they've completely missed that maybe the way to pursue honor is to pursue being honorable. The edges are sharp. Warning. He says, and they love to be called rabbi by others. They want that. What is that about? Well, that's that they want to be recognized as experts. Like, are we more interested in being recognized as people who are right or people who are righteous? And by the way, by righteous, I mean by God's definition of righteous, which means that we're like God, which means that we are loving. Which are we more interested in? Which do we focus upon? Being the right ones? Being the only right ones? Being the ones who've got it all figured out? Call me rabbi because I know? Or call me loving because I am? They are in pursuit of being honored, not being holy. Jesus calls us to something so much better than this. And so He puts in front of us three things to set aside and three things to pay attention to. And in all cases, they're really all the same thing. He attacks the ego, and He holds up relationship. He attacks the ego when He says, don't be called rabbi, and don't call other people father. Why not call them? Because you'd be building them up for something that isn't real. You know, and don't call instructors. Don't do any of this stuff. Don't seek your own honor. Don't use religion to build yourself up because you are broken. And if you build yourself up as you are, then you're just building on a broken foundation. And you will become more and more broken. Put it down. Put those things away. Anything that builds your ego as a fallen sinner, put it away. Drive it out. Don't seek it. Don't seek your own good, your own honor. Don't. Instead, remember your brothers. Remember family life in church. And remember that your Father is in heaven, and that you don't do religious stuff to impress people. You do stuff to connect with God. You're here to be near to God and to be near to your brothers and sisters. That's why you're here, to center on the Christ, to focus on Him. He is your salvation, not other people being impressed with you. And so He says, put these things aside, these things that you want. You want everyone to notice you. Stop it. Stop trying to be noticed and start trying to be loving. You want everybody to look up to you. Stop it. Step down instead of up. Don't do these things. Have a true and genuine faith. And trust God to lift you up, because that's what He says. The greatest among you will be your servant. The true religion is not lived by someone who says, hey, me. But you. What can I do for you? How can I love you? How can I be a minister in your life? What hurting place can I come and care about? What can I do to lift you up? As you do that, you become great in the lives of everyone who is loved by you. But if you sit back and wait, someone comes serve me. No, that's not how it works. He says, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Who is doing that? Who is doing the reversing? is God, the true God, who looks at the mistakes and says, you focused on the edges of the sign. Did you pay attention to what it actually said? Because those who read the sign avoided the disaster. And the disaster is that we should be things without love in our hearts. That we should be filled with religion and empty of righteousness. That we should be full of system and duty and law and meanness, murder, death, and brokenness. Instead of love and kindness and goodness and a willingness to lay down our lives for the sake of others. Because your religion is going to lead you to one of those. It really is. Religion is going to lead you to be mean, or it's going to lead you to be gentle. It's going to lead you to be judgmental, or it's going to lead you to be compassionate. That's the warning sign. Do you see it? Do you see it? And the question that I think he would ask us this morning is, are you seeking to justify yourself, to prove that you're right, to demonstrate, to get to heaven by being right about everything? Or to see yourself transformed into a person who's filled with kindness and generosity and love? Because, folks, that's the Christian life. The Christian life is not lived in establishing myself, but in undoing myself. In laying the self down, in denying the self for the sake of others and for the sake of Christ Jesus, so that I might become like Him who died for me, so I might give my life away to others. It's a hard warning. It's a dangerous thought to think that I might be focused on the edges of the sign instead of the sign. And if you look into your heart today and you see that that threat is alive in you, remember, those who don't pay attention drive off the empty bridge. Don't let that be you. The Christ has come so that it doesn't have to be you. He wants you for Himself, and He wants to lead you in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. He wants you to become a gentle, generous, loving, kind, wonderful person. It's exactly what you want to be. And if you look at yourself today and you say, you know what? That's not who I am. We want to pray for you. It may be that you came here this morning and nothing that I've said has had anything to do with what's going on in your life, but you need the prayers of the saints. And if that's the case, know that we want to pray for you. This is a praying church. We'll pray for you. And it could be that you're not a Christian. I'll tell you right now, there is no better way of life than following Jesus Christ. None. There's water right here. We'd love to talk with you about why. If you're subject this morning to the invitation of Christ, why don't you come right now while we stand and sing.